Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open Access Publishing with IGI Global. My name is Marissa Massare, and I am the Open Access Publishing Coordinator here at IGI Global. Today, I am also joined by my colleagues Lindsay Wertman, President of IGI Global, Brittany Haynes, our Director of E-Collections, as well as Matthew Pope, Editorial Assistant for our Open Access Division here at IGI Global. As we begin today, I do ask that you keep your microphones muted during the session and save all questions until the end, as we do have an allotted time for questions at the end. So the open access route of publishing encompasses many facets and covers more than just one publishing model, and therefore there are different routes to getting content published along with various benefits for contributors, which we'll explore a little bit further. So as open access is still fairly new in and of itself, there may still be some questions about what open access is exactly. Open access compiles sets of principles and publishing practices where the research and journal articles, book chapters, and even full books are distributed online free of charge and are no longer behind a paywall to access. IGI Global does offer open access publishing through both our books and journals. You may wonder what the benefits are to publishing under open access. Because open access publications are no longer solely accessible behind a paywall, published open access research can be freely shared, which leads to higher discoverability and citation impact. Open access publications still follow the rigorous standards and expedited publishing process while also going through the peer review process. The ability to freely share and distribute open access materials leads to increased advancement and collaboration with peers and others in the field. And additionally, one of our most successful journal conversions, the Journal of Organizational and End User Computing, or JOEUC, has seen its impact factor more than triple since converting to open access a little more than a year and a half ago at the beginning of 2021, while also bringing in more than 1,000 citations with that 7.4 impact factor. The number of submissions as well as published articles has also dramatically increased. With 42 published articles so far in 2022, JOEUC is already set to publish more than it did in 2021 and almost quadruple what it did in 2020 when it was publishing as a standard journal. While there are still the traditional publishing model in which all published works are only available through a paid subscription, there are many open access publishing models. The most common open access publishing models used by IGI Global are Gold Open Access, in which all published articles and chapters are freely accessible after the payment of the processing charge. The Diamond Platinum model follows the same rules as Gold Open Access. However, there is no processing charge required as there is already an external funding source secured for this processing charges. There's also hybrid open access publishing, in which the author has the option to choose to publish via the traditional or subscription-based model or through open access. In the next two slides here, we'll break down more of what hybrid versus open access is. Via the hybrid open access model, authors choose to publish either standard or open access, as stated before. If choosing to publish under the subscription-based model, the article is accepted following the peer review process and does not have to pay the processing charge. When the work is published, the article will be accessible only behind a paywall, and the copyright will then transfer to the publisher. Currently, authors through IGI Global can choose the hybrid route if they publish in one of our journals. However, come 2023, IGI Global's full journal collection will be converting to open access. So all of our hybrid journals that we have currently will be full gold open access in 2023. Under open access, once the manuscript is submitted and accepted following the peer review, the processing charge will be requested. And after formal publication, that work will be freely accessible under the Creative Commons licensing, in which the author, instead of the publisher, does retain the copyright. This process is also the same for hybrid book publications, as all IGI Global books do have the option of publishing standard or open access. So like on the previous slide, this model shows the submission process when publishing under OA. In addition, it depicts paying the processing charge or having it waived. Some authors who publish under open access may benefit from processing charge funding and discounts, such as one from our OA agreements, which Brittany will introduce just a little bit later. Regardless of payment or waiver, the manuscript will be published under open access and remain freely accessible. IGI Global does offer multiple publishing opportunities for researchers who are interested in open access. So similar to what many publishers offer, IGI Global offers open access publishing through individual journal articles, either in a gold or hybrid journal, open access book chapters, full OA books, or through proposing an open access special issue to a journal, which can either be in one of our hybrid or one of our gold open access journals. So the key to kickstarting any publication is consulting with the publisher's submission and publication guidelines. It's important that before submission that the manuscript is within the scope of the publisher and or the publication. Publishers' web pages often offer many tools such as writing and just general resources for authors before they submit their work. These resources can cover copyright and licensing guidelines for authors to follow, any potential copy editing services that may be offered, or any general inquiries. IGI Global's own open access publishing page is a great resource for authors for any general inquiries regarding open access publishing, including our editorial policy, any of our current open access initiatives, and indexing and abstracting information. For authors who are looking to submit, it's always a good idea to become familiar with the peer review process for the publication that they're looking to submit to, including how long that process of submitting the work and having it published is expected to take, each stage of the review process, and any other guidelines they may need to follow. Our fair use policy is also a great place to see everywhere you can share your work, whether it is published under hybrid or open access. OA does have a plethora of options for sharing and reuse, including organizations such as ResearchGate, Archive, and academia. As IGI Global and open access is constantly evolving, we do always welcome new opportunities and suggestions from our authors on things such as potential funding opportunities and sharing the work through different repositories. Additionally, every submission is handled through IGI Global's own editorial discovery submission system, in which all reviews and document uploads are handled. This is also a great resource to keep track of any completed or previous projects and to submit new proposals. Different models of open access in turn do have different copyright and licensing terms. Most publishers' open access publications operate under the CC BY licensing. This allows those works to be accessed through a public domain. The copyright does remain with the author of the manuscript. Others who do access that work may distribute, modify, and even build upon the work, so long as they do give credit to the author of the original publication. This allows for our researchers to have maximum dissemination possibilities, which does generate the higher citation impact and indexing potential down the road. Articles and chapters that are behind a paywall typically have lower citation rates simply because the accessibility of the article or chapter is lower, as readers must either purchase the article or chapter or to use it, or must have access to the article or chapter through their university library. Published OA manuscripts under that CC BY licensing have higher discoverability recognition and citation rates. They're less restrictive and they can read a wider professional community, which leads to more opportunities for network and collaboration. And by widely circulating full articles and chapters across the internet and amongst peers, it does increase the chances of the content being used, which in turn increases the journal or book citation rates. So one of the main differences between standard or subscription-based and open access publishing is the need for funding, either from the individual author, their institution or university, or another outside funding sponsor, which will cover the processing charge for the OA publications. So the most common processing charges that we see are the article processing charge, or the APC, or the chapter processing charge, the CPC, for individual book chapters. These processing charges cover the tasks associated with the article or chapter publication. This replaces the revenue that would have been generated by that journal or book subscriptions under the previous subscription-based model. These processing charges are not paid by the funding sponsor or individual author until the manuscript has gone through the peer review and the editor-in-chief has formally accepted the manuscript for publication. So as stated on the previous slide, these processing charges cover the costs associated with open access publishing, such as the digital tools, any promotional support needed, the formatting and layout of the work before it's published, online hosting, and any other editorial support. Additionally, in partnership with eContent Pro International, IGI Global does offer line-by-line English language copy editing with fully paid APCs and CPCs. So once authors and researchers are aware the processing charges are required for an OA publication, there may be some confusion or even difficulty when going about trying to find that funding. It's best to have the funding already secured before submission to an OA publication as to not hold it up later in the process once it is accepted. So once that funding is secured, it's safe for the author to submit to that open access publication that may be in compliance with their funding body if necessary. The manuscript will go through the peer review process and then either be accepted or rejected. That's when the processing charge will be requested to be paid. And once it is paid, the paper will move forward in the publication process. If funding is not received, the author can either switch their submission to standard. That's if the publication is not already fully open access to begin with. This would typically work with a hybrid publication. And then the other option is to withdraw that work completely from the OA publication. Publishers do recognize the difficulty and toll that can be placed on the author to secure open access funding. Many of them provide resources such as Sherpa Juliet, the Open Access Directory, and Spark for those who are on the hunt for funding. It is also encouraged that the authors check with their institution's library, as many already have dedicated open access funds established. And as I mentioned before, Brittany will touch on those a little bit later. And it is also always good to check with the university grant office to see if they collaborate with any of these OA funding resources or would be willing to collaborate in the future as to benefit that researcher or any other from that institution in the future. So an additional resource for open access publications that IGI Global offers is the ability to crowdfund. Authors who are looking to publish under open access are often not aware that open access funding does not have to come from a single funding body, but rather they can take a crowdfunding approach and secure multiple funding sources for their research. This concept is applied most often to full books, but can also be used on the individual article level. Multiple funders can support new works or the retrospective opening of a publication so that any work that was previously published under the standard access model can be converted to open access later. Some specific examples of crowdfunding would be if a book editor was looking to publish their full book under open access, the funding they receive for the book processing charges or the BPC to publish the book as OA may come from that editor, their institutional library, while the rest of the funding may be secured from a government funding agency. And the full BPC is secured from those multiple funding sources. There will be no cost to purchase the book as it will be freely accessible, therefore increasing those discoverability and citation rates. Another example, a special issue guest editor may propose a special issue for a gold open access journal. In most cases, the individual authors of each of those articles would be responsible for the article processing charge, that APC of the respective work. But if the special issue guest editor had arranged a crowdfunding plan prior to the papers being accepted, funding for the entire special issue could be funded through an open access agreement. and what isn't covered by the open access agreement may be funded by the individual authors. And even if some of the authors do fund their own work themselves, they may also have the option of securing funding through their institution at some point. There's also a number of crowdfunding platforms that authors and editors alike can use to generate funding for their publication. Examples as seen here include Kickstarter and Unglue, which are specifically designed to engage readers and provide funding to support future publications. So if an author initially publishes their work, one thing IGI Global does offer is the opportunity to revisit that work later and convert it to open access. Through IGI Global's retrospective open access program, we have seen almost 40 articles and chapters be converted just this year through that program. And under the retrospective open access program, authors can benefit from open access even if their initial publication was standard. And by choosing this route of open access, the copyright would then return to the author of the manuscripts under that CC BY licensing, which allows the copyright to remain solely with the author. And additionally, by converting their work to open access, they open up the opportunity for greater sharing capabilities for the authors who want to maximize the discoverability of their work through IGI Global, their contacts, and their research community. So as you can see here, IGI Global does make the process of converting work to open access very convenient for the authors. If interested, the author simply has to log into their IGI Global portal account and then access their personal library. You can see the personal library right here. Once in the personal library, the author can select the work they would like to convert and add and pay for it in the shopping cart. And once that processing charge to convert is paid, our customer service, production, and open access teams are notified of the work that needs to be converted. And if you're interested in this opportunity and for some reason cannot find your previously published works in your personal library, please do not hesitate to reach out to openaccessadmin@igiglobal.com for assistance. And just to show you an example here, so we can see here, I am logged into my personal IGI Global account. And once logged in, we can go to the IGI Global portal, which you see here. And if you've previously published with us, you will see your previous works in your library. Mine is empty, as I've never published anything before, but if you have published with us, you will see all your previously published works in there. And once in that personal library, you can go ahead and choose which work you would like to convert to open access. And I am now going to hand it over to Brittany, who will brief everyone on IGI Global's open access agreement and transformative options.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Marissa. It's great to see some familiar faces today. I just wanted to touch base on this because I work directly typically with libraries. Libraries being an ever-increasing source of funding for open access through items such as open access agreements and transformative options. And of course, our offerings not only apply to libraries, we also look at organizational funding, consortia, which are groupings of libraries, and we are open to having those discussions. But there are different availabilities of options to kind of support the publishing charges that go along with articles and chapters, or even full books and full journals that Marissa was talking about earlier. Because we definitely understand there's been a lot of uncertainty in the open access movement, especially for researchers in trying to find funding. And then what I often see is also with libraries as they continue to navigate the open access movement, right? So we want to work, and we're very committed to eliminating that uncertainty through flexible agreements. So your institution may already be involved in some type of open access agreement with IGI Global. For example, our most recent one is with the Auckland University of Technology. And with this first option, our open access agreements, these are purely open access where the publishing is being supported in a prepaid upfront fund. So typically an institution, whether that be a library or an organization, would invest an upfront amount into an open access agreement fund, and that would provide their researchers or their faculty with funding support for article processing charges in IGI Global journals, which will be imperative as we make that big shift to move all of our journals to open access in 2023 that Marissa referred to. One additional incentive for this is not only can we give one-on-one support and analysis to institutions, libraries about the publishing appetite we see from their faculty historically to indicate what we expect or anticipate that fund might need to be, but then they can also benefit from additional discounts on article processing charges based on the amount that they are investing. So as I mentioned, we're currently working with Auckland University of Technology as one example, and they are ranked among the world's top 1% of universities. Obviously, a lot of research output coming from that institution. So you can learn more about that in our newsroom, and we can always pass along that press release as well. You can go ahead and shift to the next one. So of the 3 options we offer, the open access agreements was the first. This is the transformative open access option. So because we're shifting all of our journals to open access in 2023, we still have our back file of our e-journal collection, which contains all of our journals at IJI Global from the 2000 to 2022 volume year. So with that, that's about 110 journals still available for purchase. I work with libraries regularly on this acquisition. So the additional benefit here is that when investing in that back file content, we can actually convert previously published work from faculty from that institution to open access under the CC BY 4.0 license, where it's freely distributable and shareable, as Marissa discussed. And that is based on the investment level of the institution or organization. So here, we're not only making that big shift to move everything over to open access for our journals, but this enables institutions and their researchers to have access to much needed content in our highly cited journals from those back file and current volume years. And then we can also work on transforming the rest of the collection too to open access. And then the final option, just to keep in mind, is publish and read agreements. So those are obviously great to support not only the open access movement, but the overall DEIA movement, because with something like a publish and read, it's usually a flipped model wherein the content is not being paid for, but rather the entire book or journal publication that is being led by the faculty of the funding body. Essentially, a full book publication or a full journal publication can be fully funded by an outside source to be open access. So any chapters going into that book or articles going into that journal that's being supported has to go through the peer review process, of course, but upon acceptance, if it has that platinum funding through something like, say, a publish and read agreement, anyone from around the world that's submitting to that publication and getting accepted would be supported. Their work would be under open access, so they don't have to worry about article processing charges or chapter processing charges in those cases. So we can work with institutions and organizations on fully supporting entire publications. And then the added benefit there is this can lead to access to our e-collections, ebooks and e-journals at no additional cost, because that funding model is flipped and the publishing is being paid for. One example of this that we've really been excited to promote, because it's actually a book about open access written by a librarian and supported by his library, is our Handbook of Research on the Global View of Open Access and Scholarly Communications. This was a collaboration I worked directly with University of North Texas in the USA on. They were able to invest in our e-collections and support the book publication edited by Dr. Lemne at their institution to be fully open access. So any of those chapters that were accepted then, and there were international researchers and experts from around the world discussing items like copyrights, licensing, the view of open access, and similar items in this publication, those all were covered. And those authors did not have to pay for the chapter processing charge to make their work open access. So this collaboration was the first of its kind with us to result in a platinum open access reference book being fully supported. And it also provided the availability to receive flexible open access support for those authors. And of course, then increased accessibility of research and inclusive OA practices, with there being nearly a 90% higher download rate for works industry-wide that are published under open access. And that's really it for that. So one thing I would just strongly recommend is if you are a librarian or part of a consortia or an organization that's interested in supporting your faculty and researchers with open access funding, to reach out to us at Marissa at open access at igi-global.com or to us directly at eresources at igi-global.com. And we can definitely touch base about your faculty or researcher publishing history with IGI Global, the different options we have. And if you're a researcher, just checking with us to see if your institution currently benefits from anything like this, or recommending to your library in particular that they have this conversation with us so we can give them the options that are available. So with that, I will pass this back over to Marissa for questions.
Okay, so now we will open up the floor for any questions after the discussion. We have allotted a generous portion of today towards questions because we do want to hear from you and encourage any further discussion on open access. So please do send out questions through the Zoom chat. If time does run out and every question is not answered, we will be providing follow-up documentation on today's question session following the open access discussion. And I will also put up the contact information that Brittany had just discussed. So there's mine, Brittany's, our e-resources team, and as well as our open access team. So those are all available for any questions.
And while we wait on questions, hi, Lindsay Wertman, president of IGI Global. I was just going to chime in because I think some of the questions that I personally receive oftentimes from researchers is just, where do I start with the process of looking into funding? And I know that that is such a barrier. Researchers that are interested in publishing their work under OA just don't really know where to go because of that APC or the CPC fee that they're facing. Definitely checking in with your institution first is really the way to go. As Brittany said, it's important to find out what kind of agreements might be in place, checking in with us as well. But scholarly communications librarians hold so much power and they are so valued in the open access movement because they really are the ones that are communicating out, different OA publishing trends, and they are, able to, support a lot of times different funding pathways. And it is really good to kind of start with them as far as looking into different OA initiatives. I know oftentimes too, they'll have, the list of publishers, and they'll, be able to talk through, the process for even collaborating with publishers. So we definitely want to make sure, first of all, we want to make sure that your scholarly communications librarians are familiar with us. I mean, that is definitely number one. We want to make sure that they're not, sitting there going, well, I haven't heard of IGI Global, or I wasn't familiar that IGI Global is doing OA publishing. So we definitely want to get the word out there. And at the same token, we definitely want to be able to collaborate with them to see what sort of options we can extend, to different researchers, and even look at opportunities for possibly opening up full publications, because we really want to make it as easy as possible. We certainly don't want to see authors having a challenging time of being able to secure funding. So I definitely would advise starting there. And then we absolutely enjoy taking the time to talk to librarians. I know that Brittany spends a huge amount of her time getting to know librarians and trying to formulate these relationships. And Marissa is always collaborating as well. So that would be just my advice, is just on where to start there. And also just compliance is such a huge one too. Once you get funding, or if you're in the process of getting funding, there is a very, very lengthy list of different requirements, and that could be everything from ensuring that your work is included in an institutional repository. It could include, just the way that the Creative Commons license is listed. There might be a specific requirement by that funder. We definitely want to have dialogue on that as well, because what we don't want to see happen is you believe you have funding secured and suddenly you're not able to attain it because of some misconception that we can't do something, or that later you're not able to secure funding again because your paper didn't end up in some repository that could be quite easy for us to ensure it ends up in, and we just didn't have that discussion. So definitely that's another side of it too, is there are so many mandates and so many requirements for funding that we want to make sure we're working together to ensure that your work is meeting all of those requirements. And I don't know, I think that there's some things coming in through chat. So Marissa, I'm going to pass it back over to you and take a look and see what questions we might have coming in.
Okay. I did want to note that these slides will be shared with the participants after this meeting. So you will receive this in an email. So you can access it at a later date, go back if you have any questions. And you can also, click through the links that were provided to give you any more information on any other questions you might have following this. Okay, here's one. So many authors may find that they do not have enough hours in the day to author, publish, teach, and complete crowdfunding tasks, in addition to making time for their personal life. Any thoughts on this challenge? As far as the funding goes for that, and all the associated tasks that go with, preparing the research, making it ready to submit to a publication, and any time spent on revisions. We do get a lot of authors, researchers coming in, stating that, they may be interested, but that just is not the right time for them to submit their work. So we always do encourage that if this isn't the right time, whatever's going on in their life, whether it be professionally, personally, we do always encourage them to, take the time that they need to get everything ready, to have it ready for that final submission. So we don't want to rush anything. We do understand that there's more going on than just, submitting the research, getting it ready to be published. So just there's always that opportunity to submit it when it is ready.
And also retrospective, just looking at that side of it, if there's a concern for funding, first of all, the collaborative approach towards funding, if you do have a couple of authors on a paper or a couple of editors on a publication, obviously that could give greater reach across universities. So you could end up having a situation where one editor is able to possibly secure funding from their institution or even a corporation that maybe that they do some consulting work with or what have you. So there is that just by having various colleagues associated with the work. But even if an individual is not able to secure funding at the point where the paper is accepted and it's moving through to publication, we do offer that retrospective OA program. So it could very well be published under standard access, and months later, OA funding falls in your lap, you're able to actually move forward with converting the work. We are able to offer a reduced APC CPC rate. We can convert the work. It will hold the Creative Commons licensing. You'll get the full benefits of open access. And that's a really great option for people that find it very daunting to try to secure the OA funding right now and know that it's something maybe they could achieve in a couple of months. It's just not something they can do right now. You can always publish under standard access and convert it later. And that's an option for book chapters and journal articles. So any author really can publish standard and then later revisit their work and say, you know what, now I think I'm prepared. I think I can secure funding or self-fund and open that work up. So that's something important to note too. But definitely, I mean, we are, quite flexible. I know our editors, they will work with you to ensure, that the turnaround on your work as you work to conceptualize and write, they'll work with you. And we definitely do have a great program for our journals. There are rolling deadlines a lot of times, but for, for our book publications as well, we're always very flexible that if for some reason you are not able to continue your work on a paper, we can certainly find another outlet for it later if it's not making the publication deadline.
So those were about the requesting the slides after this, and then that last question.
So this one just came in. Why has IGI Global decided to provide open access publications?
That's a good one. That's almost a why are we here today talking about this, right? No, I mean, ultimately, this is a big industry movement. The reality that we're facing as a publisher, I'll be honest with you, we initially had planned on doing about a 5-year conversion period for our journal collection, and actually had to shorten it to a 3-year period because that is where the industry is going. Looking at subscription budgets, and I know Brittany hears me a lot when I say this, but looking at, subscription budgets, budgets for serials shrinking so much, and the appetite for the open access movement, people want content. They want it open. They don't want any barriers to accessing that content, especially when you're looking into fields like medical fields. And, it's what we've been hearing from everyone. We're hearing it from the library community. We're hearing it from the researcher academic community. And so we really just want to try to pull out any barriers to accessing the content, and really for publishers to sustain themselves, they have to start converting more of their collections to open access. Funding is turning more into OA funding and less, subscription funding. And that's really where we're seeing the industry go right now. I think the pandemic had a lot to do with that. I think with people needing digital content more widely available and more rapidly, that's really what has pushed this movement. And at present, IGI Global's plan, we are planning on converting our entire journal collection over to OA, and we have been releasing a handful of open access books. And I do anticipate that being a rapid development over the next several years, just seeing more full OA books coming through, and of course the individual papers moving.
So
I see a question about quality too come in. Yeah, so looking at open access, so really, there's not previously, probably one of the largest differences between open access and subscription based is for quite a period of time, there was a little bit more of an embargo. And open access publications were really allowing more of a rapid publication, that continuous publication frequency. IGI Global actually switched over to a continuous publication frequency, even for its non-open access journals, just allowing content to start moving through as soon as it's accepted following the peer review being released electronically. But in terms of the quality, so the quality is 100% the same, whether it is subscription-based or open access. That peer review process that we stand behind, the double-blind peer review, is the same for open access as it is for our subscription-based publications. So there is no differentiating factor there. We do, of course, we want to see our review board members and our editors, taking turnaround seriously. We want to make sure authors aren't waiting too long for decisions on their work. But in terms of the number of reviewers being assigned to the work, the rigorous nature of the peer review, the evaluation criteria, it is all the same, regardless of whether it is an open access publication or standard. So we have not seen quality diminish. We do see a relationship between indexing and submission rates. I'd be lying if I didn't, kind of deal with that elephant in the room, that it does seem as though authors are able to get funding more easily for index journals, the journals that are a bit more established. So, there are some journals that just naturally had a high volume of submissions before, and even when converted, continue to have a high volume of submissions. And journals that are lesser indexed or newer, haven't garnered that citation impact yet, may not be seeing as many submissions. So the turnaround times could, of course, vary just based on the volume of work that the review boards and editors are expected to put forth. But that still has, nothing to do with the level of rigor going into the review process. So we personally have not seen any quality being compromised. It is still the standard procedure. Our editorial policies are very much the same. We do not allow APCs or CPCs to interfere with the decision on the acceptance of manuscripts. Hence, the acceptance comes before the processing charge is requested. what would you tell college students? I'm seeing them come in. What would you tell college students about OA publications? I think my question would be in terms of, considering publishing in them down the line, or using OA content as a resource. Using, okay. Well, I mean, I'm a bit far removed from being a student myself, but I do remember the days of having to log in or pay for content to get what I needed in real time to complete a research project. And I personally think as long as you are ensuring that the work is coming from a credible publisher, I think open access is fantastic. I think that it really allows students, especially students that don't have huge research budgets, to be able to access content. Credibility is, unfortunately, right now, there are definitely some inconsistencies, and there's a level of subjectivity that comes into being able to determine credible publishers from predatory. I know that there was a lot to do with, Beals List back in the day. And then I know that Cabell's has been doing some things with lists. So I do think that that's an ongoing challenge for researchers, is to be able to differentiate. And I wouldn't say don't discount lesser known publishers. That doesn't mean that they're not credible, but I would pay attention to a lot of things, making sure that if students are going to look for OA content, make sure it's coming from a journal that has a true ISSN. Make sure there's a peer review process behind that publication. Committee on Publication Ethics, COPE is a really good resource to review the publishers on that list as kind of being a safe list to look at. That would be my recommendation, is absolutely open access 100% can be so helpful to students, but just make sure that they're being careful. Whether you're a student yourself or if you have students, just make sure that they're being very careful about where they're pulling that content from, and look for some of the red flags, which we actually would be happy to share that out if that would be helpful to everyone. We can kind of put together a little list of a checklist of what to look for. I think that would be a great follow-up to this. I think that there's some more coming in. That's a good question. Would some journals within the IGI Global umbrella fold if the submissions to its OA journals drop due to lack of funding for APC fees? So there is a reality. So looking at indexing, okay, so journals, I can tell you that when it comes to journals that are being considered with different indices or are already accepted into indices, if they start to see submission drops, so if it turns into a situation where a journal, for instance, published 50 the year prior, and now they're in the current year and they're only publishing 20, that could definitely put a journal at risk of losing its indexing status. So that would be a concern for us as a publisher. But in terms of, the fact that it is now open access, some of the other facets that we would normally worry about as a publisher, like, are we fulfilling subscribers' needs? Are we, meeting, other requirements, for other, repositories or things that we're in? Under OA, some of that pressure does come off, and the continuous publication frequency of not being held to set issues where, we need to make sure for the print version, we're delivering 5 articles per issue, 10 articles per issue. So, at this point in time, we do intend on continuing journals, even if they temporarily see a dip in submissions. We would not look to cancel a journal. We would definitely have some conversations about how can we garner funding for these journals, or how can we, support with trying to identify where maybe more submissions can be drawn from, or, how we can promote the journal further. But we would not be looking to cancel a journal abruptly, especially because it is very common that during the first year of conversion for a journal that the submissions can vary a bit, just because of that, that need to collect an APC, and authors might need to take some time to secure that funding. other questions? Am I missing any, or are there any coming in, Brittany, Marissa, that you guys?
Not seeing any more.
Yep, no new ones that I'm seeing.
Okay. I would definitely invite if there is anyone that would like to speak on any particular challenges that they're facing, or I know that there's so much going on with OA. If there is anything that anyone wanted to bring to the table for discussion, I know there's a lot we as a publisher could learn, I'm sure. Okay. I don't know that there is anything more.
I believe so.
If there are any further questions that come in, we can definitely follow up individually. As we said, I think definitely we'll follow up with the recording of this presentation today, and also, you know, some of the, I think it would be really great for us to provide you all, we can provide some really easy tips on, you know, identifying credible journals, credible publications as you navigate the OA landscape. You know, as I said, there's not really a lot of industry consistency right now, but we can definitely tell you what our observations have been and some things that we would just recommend you look for. Even if you're not publishing with us, we want to make sure that you're in good hands. So that's important to us. We don't want to see, you know, we advocate for clean, you know, properly vetted research being out there. We don't want to see any contamination of the research out there. And we want to make sure that, you know, questionable publishers aren't continuing to, you know, integrate. And we want to make sure that your work is falling into the right hands. So that's what we want to really remain committed to. So we certainly are happy to help with that. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And I know I came on in the tail end of it, but I do appreciate Marissa and Brittany, you know, giving an excellent overview. And you're, of course, welcome to reach out to me as well directly should you have, you know, any questions on some of those industry observations. I always love to hear from everyone. So if you do want to reach out to me as well, my email is lwertman@igglobal.com. I really welcome any observations you're seeing about OA and maybe some of your experiences you've even had with other publishers that you'd wish to share. So.
And then I will be following up with the recording and slides after this, so they're available to everybody.
Okay, thank you, and have a wonderful afternoon or evening or morning, depending on where everybody is. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.